guess I'm going to record it then. All right. Well, let there's funeral. Um, okay. So we're talking about the project. Okay. So online you'll find the that I've put together the teams and published the team. So everyone who's on a team is um, is everyone who requested a team should find themselves on the team with the people they wanted, and anyone who hadn't signed up for a team is on their is was randomly placed onto a team. Um, the midterm, of course, is next week, and I guess that's about it. All right, so we were talking about the project when we left off last time, and we went over the highlights of the project, and I went over this document, um, the descriptions and deliverables document, and anyway, so I'm going to well, I don't know. Honestly, technically, I suppose they were canceled. I'm having an inner debate while I'm talking whether I should just give up today and pick it up on Monday, Tuesday in this course. What do you guys think? No one has an opinion? Well, I don't want to do it from my next course. I started recording it. Yeah, I started recording. Yeah, so that's given. Yeah, I'm not going to do it for my next course because that course is way behind. I was a week behind, and I need to catch up with that. So let's just do it. I'll record it, and we'll not fall a day behind. Yeah, I'm not going to take attendance. I don't take attendance online regardless. Um, oh, I guess I could have sent out an email. I didn't consider that. Um, hmm. Okay. Well, let's just run with it, and I'm recording it, and it's just like a step back in time. So if nothing else, I don't want to fall another day behind. I'd like to finish. I hate to be behind at the end of the semester, and then be rushing things. So we've already missed a day for other reasons, and let's not do that again. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about in the project is the phase one description um, for the streaming project. Oh, okay. So this is the document we were working on. Okay, now I've got my act together here. I'm a little bit flustered and a little bit late because initially my headset, my USB headset here wouldn't connect, so I had to reboot my machine, and that took a few minutes. And now this thing. All right, let's bring this up again. Okay, so we talked about this document last time, and okay, so now we're going to go over the other features. So we went over this last time. Okay, so now the next one is streaming service evaluation. Streaming service evaluation. Okay, so this is a document that needs to be submitted with every with one document for every team, and on it, this is the document I use. I'll fill out. When I'm evaluating your individual team submissions, I'll be filling out and then returning this document, completed document to each of the team members. But I'd like you to fill it out, with your team number, and then in this table, each I should make this 5. I just realized I should expand this out by one more row because some teams have 5 members. All right. And so what I'd like here is you to list each of the team members' names and their net ID. The reason for that is I don't have to enter them myself. And if you have a team member who doesn't contribute, who is I've assigned a team, uh, assigned you to the team, and you know everyone's pretty good about everyone's good about making group meetings online or in person, whatever. But one person, is not contributing. They didn't contribute to the SRS. They didn't, maybe even didn't do the use cases. Now, most of the time when that situation arises, that person is dropped the course, especially after the midterm. If they did very poorly, and some people, they did really poorly in the midterm, which I can't imagine how, but they drop the course. And I don't really get a notification that they've been dropped. I don't get an email or anything. They just go ahead and drop it, and and obviously they don't, that are not going to participate in the with the team project. But they'd also have a tendency not to acknowledge that, so they just ignore the emails and what have you from their team members. So, like I said before, if you have somebody who's not responding, who's not contributing, then leave them off this list, and they won't get credit the for having done the project. Now, if they dropped, that's not a thing. But sometimes people just ignore the project for whatever reason. They figure they'll get a C, and if they do well on the exams, they'll get a C, whatever their motivation is, and they're happy with that. So they still won't respond. And those are people. So that's someone who's still enrolled but is not participating in the project. Again, leave their name off of this list. Um, but what I would like to know is, when it becomes apparent after the second week or so of the project that they're not participating, it would be great if you could somebody on the team could send me an email giving, the course, the section number, the team number, and, an explanation of, what the problem is. This person, hasn't contributed. And then I'll reach out to them and ask, see if something's going on. Again, if they drop, then that's that. But otherwise, um, they might come back. Sometimes it gets, a little bit fussy. They have reasons, why it's not working out. And what I wind up doing is just moving that person to their own team. They're still responsible for all of the work, the SRS and the design phase is coming up. So they're basically a team of one, which is not a good situation. But if they can't contribute, if they can't participate with their assigned team, then that's my only option. Um, so that's what this list is about. Um, any questions about that? Okay. Oh, thanks. All right. And then the second half, just ignore it. This will be for the second phase. So you're going to, um, well, anyway, we'll talk about the second phase when we get to it. Oh, this should say spring 22. I wonder why. I thought I changed that. Always something. I'm 90% sure I changed it, so I'm wondering if I'm working. Well, anyway, it's hard to manage all these documents. Okay, anyway, close that. Next document on the line is the SRS template. So let's talk about SRS. So what I'm giving you a so let's look at the actual SRS. So what we're looking at here is an industry template for a software requirements specification, or SRS. Okay, and this is the format, generally the format that I'm having you follow. So, this is a software requirement specification, IEEE standard. It's a little bit old, 93, but these things don't change much. And there's an explanation, an introduction, then all of the people who voted on it. This is a huge committee, obviously. Table of contents, and it kind of goes over the purpose of the SRS. What purpose does this document form? I'm sorry, what is the purpose of this document in the software development project? Information, and then there is a an introduction. Then here is this SRS in this document, this 830 document, their template for how an for an actual SRS. So the beginning of the document is basically justification. What is this SRS? What's the purpose of an SRS? What information should an SRS contain, and so on and so forth. And then there's this template. Now it's under heading 5, section 5 of this. What I've provided is I've taken this document outline in section 5 of the 830 spec, and I have created if I can find it, it's up at the top, is a template. It's a Word document template. So you'll find that the table of contents more or less matches the table of contents. It just had a table of contents. I don't remember it right now. Yeah, like right here. So section 2, project. So I'm providing you this template, the teams, this template, and not each of the sections in the SRS I feel are necessary or important. I'll have you fill in. So the sections which are highlighted are mandatory. Okay? Sections, we can find one down here a little bit further down, we'll find something, that are not highlighted are not, but if a team was to provide some, verbiage here, make an effort at providing the information, that would go way very favorably, and over and above, the average effort, if you see what I'm saying, the difference between a B and an A or something. Okay, so things are highlighted, mandatory. So you basically will create, you use this template. You'll, put their team number on it. You notice the file name has a team number, XX. So, your team number as defined in that roster. And then fill it out, for your version of the streaming service. Okay. Let's scroll up a little bit. So, so here, now what I'm asking for here is, usually a software project is run with, either formal requirements or use cases. Now you can, but I'm asking for both. I'm asking for teams to provide me a certain number of functional formal requirements, and every individually, each team member produces 5 use cases. So in this section here, I want, I would like you to put together, for the formal requirements, identify some number. I don't have a specific number in mind, but it should be, more than 2 or 3 functional categories for, for ecom. I gave you the example of customer management, product management, browsing, order processing, reporting, returns. Those were functional categories, and then with each functional category, there were a number of features and as high-level subcategories for the requirements within each of these functional categories. So features within the category. So 1 category, 2 categories. Like I said, you should have more than 2. The way to make this work is you just select the table and then put a line between the next table and then paste it in, and you can have, here's 4 categories for you to fill in. Okay, same thing for the now on the use case side. Identify all of the each of the actors. Obviously there'll be a customer or a user, have to be some sort of administrator, actor, and then this is for streaming service, and then come up with 1 or 2 others. That would be nice. And here you put and then again the same thing, every actor, and then their goals. What are their goals, when using the system. And then you can duplicate, if you have more than 2 actors, you could duplicate this table and then expand it out. It's easy to do. To expand out to the next row, you just basically will go to the last cell in the table and tab, and it expands out the table. Okay. I'm asking for you to put together some GUI screens, so just some mock-ups of the various screens, some of the screens that you imagine the system will need. You can do this with a drawing tool. You can use, any sort of 2D drawing tool you want to, as long as you can draw rectangles and put down text, that should be good enough. And then paste those into this section. Oh, let me point out something I forgot to mention when I first started talking about this document. We talked about professionalism. And so I have all of these, there's some instructions at the top. This is, description. This is from that document, that PDF we just looked at, and so on. But here I'm saying remove the descriptive text, between these brackets. So here, so either remove or complete. So here is a bracket, and I want you to put the, the date that you compose or release the document and revision number. It's a professional thing. The professional documents would have, the date and document revision number, and each time another revision is pushed out, is released, there'd be another date, an increase, version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. The T number, so I can figure out who's on it. Your authors go here, just like this other document, but I want your names here. You can fix this by going here and update fields. So before you turn it in, when you inject text between these sections, the page you're going to have more than 8 pages, and so so revise the table of contents. But remove what I was getting back at is remove. So that's okay. You'll need to fill that in. Let me see if I can find first one here. Get rid of this. Okay. Delete it from the document. That's an instruction. This is an instruction. Delete it from the document. Don't turn it in with the instruction text. That would be professional. So anything in a bracket in these brackets, and this is the whole thing. Notice it's a multi-lined instruction. Here's the opening and close. So all of that should be removed, and you should put your own, verbiage in terms of the project scope, purpose, and so on. Here I have an instruction. I gave you the first sentence, and then continue. And so this is all going to go, and then continue the document. Okay. So remove all of these instructional text before you turn it in. Might seem obvious, but you'll be surprised how many teams turn in the document with this instructional text still in place. So some GUI screens you can cut and paste into Word. Now this is optional, it's not highlighted, but if this streaming service is going to be a web service, so if you want to put down some information about the interface, the web service interface, although this is more of a design, so I think it'd be nice, but I shouldn't even bring it up because it's probably confusing people. This is really more of a design artifact. You come analysis and design. All right, so functional requirements. Okay, so I'm asking for, it's in I updated the other document with a little more, so you don't want to ignore it. The document with the, I don't think this is the one. This one. Scroll down. Right here. So what I'm asking for in terms of the formal requirements, functional requirements, is a minimum of 15 functional requirements per team member and 10 non-functional requirements across for the entire project, for the whole team. So this is not 10 non-functional requirements per team member, it's for the entire team. 10 non-functional requirements, performance related, security, whatever. But again, 15, this is the minimum. Now I've seen, the ones that impress me, will maybe produce more than 100 requirements in their document. And it's not as hard as it sounds. It's this is a very rich and feature-rich problem domain. And so, and each requirement is very specific and very narrow in its scope. So, you could, I think you could put together 100 easy. But anyway, 15, so a team of 4, the minimum 60 formal requirements. And again, 10 non-functional requirements, okay? All right, go back to this document here. I guess I'll just do that. So this gets back, so now I'm going to sidetrack a little bit more, and I'm going to say I provided, 3 examples of SRSs from previous semesters. One thing you'll notice is that the table containing the formal requirements is embedded into the Word document, okay? So it's in the Word document itself. And that normally went under, 3.2.1. I've changed that this semester, or no, well, actually it was previous semester, but carrying over now into using the spreadsheet. Now I updated this a little bit too, so you want to get down the latest version of it. Updated it earlier this morning. And so remember, each of these worksheets with sheets within the work. This is an Excel workbook, and then here we have the worksheet, and of course rename the template document to something you're streaming, with your team number and stuff on it. Don't just give me that. Well, it would be nice if you renamed it. And then so here we have categories, and those are the categories that we identified right here. So we have a now this is for e-com, and obviously doesn't apply to streaming service, but still, you would replace this with one of your you'd have one sheet per functional category, and then within each sheet you'd have the requirements, that fall within that category. And so you can add new sheets. I mean, let you figure this out. It's not rocket science. Anyone, if you've ever used Excel, add new sheets. And then I have a special, and you can drag the sheets around, so on. Excuse me. Or you could actually, I think I didn't do that right. Let me get rid of that. Delete that. What you want to do is you want to copy, and maybe copy the new sheet, create a copy, and then you'll have a new, because what you want the sheet with the template on it. If you just says just do a new sheet, you'll get a blank sheet. Anyway, you can figure this out. Again, not rocket science. You could have copied and pasted too. So let's go over these columns just one more time. Remember that we have these each row in the sheet is a separate requirement. So first, second, third, and so on. Then for the columns, this is the ID. So every requirement throughout the document, needs to be unique, a unique ID. A nice, easy way to manage that is to simply, because we're partitioning the requirements into these categories, is just using the requirement, the CM for customer management, PM for product management, and whatever else you come up with. NF, maybe NF for non-functional. That works for me. And then CM1, 2, 3, 4, and you see that. So that's how you get a unique ID for every requirement within, by using the category. And then the importance to the business, importance to the business, but importance to the success of the project. So whatever your scale happens to be, I'm saying 1 is most important, 5 is least important, nice to have. You could say, you could use any scale you want, but just to be consistent. Then the initials of the author, who put it together. Could be middle, MGC or MC. And then the date the requirement was entered, just to keep track of it. Now, if you recall, when we talked about requirements, there was this idea of hierarchically decomposing large requirements into small requirements. So phase 1 gather and requirements gathering might be very broad requirements, and then phase 2 would be, you would divide this requirement into other small, more fine grained requirements based on a parent, like a tree. Okay, so if that's just confusing, don't worry about it, because we're not going to use it. but I put the column in anyway, just to emphasize that, you know, a real tool and a professional tool for gathering requirements would allow you to take a requirement and then, you know, split it, you know, and then create a second level requirement and, you know, with more detail, several requirements, you know, explaining this requirement in more detail, the parent requirement in more detail. Anyway, maybe I should leave it in. And then remember, this is about the requirements traceability. Again, you're not going to do it. And if I were to ask you to fill this in, it would be in design, because during requirements, you don't know what the classes and components are of your software design. But, you know, in a real situation, chances are, you know, once the design, at least at some point in the project lifecycle, somebody should go through and for each requirement, identify the class or component in the actual software that implements that requirement for the sake of traceability, to identify if there were requirements in the system that weren't implemented. But again, I'm not asking you to do this, but I left it in just, you know, as an indicator, you know, just as to I don't know, it looks good, professional. Are there any questions about this spreadsheet? Okay, so, oh, good. Well, phase one, no. Well, you shouldn't. Oh. Well, in phase two, you can go back and update it. I wouldn't do it for phase one because I'm trying to tell you, you know, what do we say about phase, you know, requirements? You know, the what and the why, but not the how. And so the how you're going to implement it is, you know, that's analysis and design, which is the second phase. So what I'm saying is, if you want during the second phase, if you want to go back and identify the classes in the design, you know, that you've built for phase two, that would be very interesting. And then I would be, you know, I've never seen anyone do that. But for phase one, you know, it really tells me you're thinking about design while putting together requirements, and that's not really something you should be doing. That's kind of my point, Greg. Yeah. Okay. But it's a good question. All right. Oh, 19 people. Thank you. Okay, so no questions. Other questions? All right, getting back to the template. Let's see here. GUI screens, functional requirements, non-functional requirements were once recorded in the document and in a Word table embedded into this document, but I think this works out much better. Let me just close this. I want to make sure I don't save it. Okay, now talking about the use cases. So, you know, here we're talking about requirements, now we're talking about use cases. You know, two separate things, but I'm asking you to do both. Maybe some little description about what you're putting in here. Now it says each template provides n fully addressed use cases, sees project description. Like I learned the hard way that if I'm going to put dates or quantities, I need to record it in one document, because if I put it in two documents, I don't update the other, and then people have and then confusion, a lot of confusion. Okay, so what I want you to do is, you know, if there's, I only have, there's at least 4. I should maybe update this document with, yeah, you just put it in, oh, that's a good point. I know, I was thinking of that too. Yeah, I could just say, see this document. You know, I would say, see this document. And then the name of the document. Yeah, that's sufficient. Yeah, see, whatever, you should rename this, you know, team XYZ requirements document or something. Okay, yeah, there should be, you know, probably, because most teams have 4, I should just go ahead and put 4 in here. I thought about this yesterday when I was presenting the same material. That's it. So again, each team, and then student and their net ID, and then the name. You know, there's a, if we go look at that template, which we will in a sec, you know, the name, the description or the definition, a brief description of the use case. So this probably should be better named description, but as it says right here, description. So, and you need at least 5. So maybe I should put 2 more here. As I said, each team gets 5. So I think I'll update that. Let me write that down just so, I mean, like I said, I'm just trying to really make this really easy to follow. I'm writing something down. 2, 5. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so logical database requirements. If you want, again, this is more of a design artifact, analysis or design logic, but it's in the, again, it's in the original 830 specification. So I left it in. Something about the design. Maybe this would be where I'd put the schema for the database, perhaps. Design constraints, standard. If you can come up with something interesting, and again, the use case, this 830 document gives you some idea. So if you're looking to go the extra yard, then you might look up what these sections are asking for. Although I do put down some. I've read them over and put down some text myself, my own take on what goes into these sections. There's more detail in the actual spec, the actual 830 spec, the 830 standard spec. Okay, now, like for example, systems compliance. Your and again, this is just something I would be impressed with. You might refer to if you could look up and get the PCI standard document, and then here say we're going to comply with that, because your site or any site that collects that holds on to credit card information has to meet these standards in terms of security and how the credit cards are stored. And so there's this PCI standard, and it's actually a federal regulation, because when people give you the credit card, they're giving you personal information. So if you wanted to reference that standard, that would be interesting. Another example is healthcare information, but I don't think you're storing any healthcare information on this system, but I'm just giving it as an example that, but if you were building a system that was storing health information, personal health information, that you'd have to follow these standards. Okay. System quality attributes. These are quality attributes. We talked about them. We'll talk more about them. But if you can go into each section and describe, what are the aspects in terms of the system requirements, how is the quality attribute or the attribute reliability and availability of our system? How important, or what is important about security for our system? Well, credit cards would be one thing, obviously, personal information, so on. Maintainability, portability of the system, maybe not as important. I'm writing something else down. Quality attributes. Okay. And then just some supporting information that you want to add. That's actually, it's in this document, I believe, in the template, in the SRS spec. So you can fill something else in there. Again, portability is not highlighted because I don't know. And that's what I'm thinking I might change this to something else. So that's, what you need to do. Again, I gave you the spec, and I gave you the template that I, have filled in. You need to complete that as a team. This is a team document. Oh, I didn't mention something before. Let me see if I still have it open. Where is it? Let's go back to the the evaluation. Right. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, 50% of the phase 1. So the percentage of phase 1 that contributes to your final project course grade, final course grade, is in the syllabus. So for the first phase grade, 50% of the grade will be is determined by this the quality of this SRS. Then the second 50% is the individual effort that each team member put into their 5 use cases. Okay, so again, 50% of each individual grade, each individual team member's grade comes from the quality of the SRS, and then the other 50 from their individual efforts in the use cases. So if you have but one team member, if you got a 50 for here, let me see this. I'll get to that, but the answer is no, they cannot overlap. No, I'm not going to have one use case being duplicated 5 times. Yeah, they can't overlap, and that's one thing that that brings up a good question, a good point, I should say. If I go back here, here when you're recording your use cases, I don't want to see any. I'll read these over and I'll look for duplication, and then I'll have a look at the actual use case documents. So that's one reason for my having you record this information in one place in this SRS is I can look at, see, what the definitions are, what the descriptions are, and look for overlap. Yeah, they can't overlap. Otherwise, I would just get 5 use cases duplicated 5 times, in a worst case. And people, I mean, you'd be surprised. People, the letter of the law, so to speak. Yeah, okay. So that's that. And then, like I say, when I review your project after submitting it, I will fill in this document with your grade, what I thought was a quality, maybe some comments. Usually, I only put comments in if I find a problem. So if I didn't find any problems, I won't enter a comment. All right. That. Let's see if I don't miss anything here. So the requirements template we went over, the use case. Okay, yeah, use case template. Okay, so like I said, 5 use cases, and then I provided a template here, not for the SRS, where is it? Use case template, right here. Did it go on a different? Oh, here it is. Okay. Excuse me. So here's some instructions. Again, remove these instructions. Don't turn in the document with stuff, instructions or these angle text. Fill in the forms and so on. Also, when you turn in, each individual is going to turn in 5 use cases, and the chances are you're just going to lump them into the zip archive. So this be I'll get a zip archive with the SRS, the eval sheet, the requirements spreadsheet, and then 20 use case Word documents, right? For 5 from each team member of 4, a team size of 4. So, I need help identifying which use case, belongs to which team member. So you need to name each of your use case documents, just to leave them use case template Word documents, T1, T2. I want them to be your net ID, use case, and then the use case ID, which, you might put here. So, and it could be something as, UC, maybe your initials, MGC1, MGC2, MGC3. Being your the first, it's the first 3 letters of your net ID. So I want the net ID, MGC 0130000, use case, and then some ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just want to be able to differentiate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So each use case has to have the net ID. Each use case document has to have the net ID, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minimally. All right, and then so 5 documents. 5 documents per team member, and then just fill these out. They're pretty descriptive. Who are the actors? What was the actor's goal? Business value again. How important is this? use case to the success of the project. It's critical, important, nice to have. That's another scale. In the requirements, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's another way of doing it, however you wish. But some some value indicating the importance of the use case, and then a description of what's going on, an overview of what the use case. And so here I have mandatory, and then kind of like highlight what you have to provide. Um, and so we're doing both for each use case. I'm asking for both the tabular representation of this is the first step, so this is the trigger event, the user's action that triggers the scenario, the system's response, the user back and forth, and this is, of course, this is the main success scenario, okay, as we described it, in the section on requirements. So back and forth, these are read, left to right, top to bottom, step 1, step 2, 3, 4, so on. Then, for each use case, I would like you to identify, although I'm not giving a particular number, this is where, individual effort comes in. If there's just the main success scenario, but no alternatives, then, that's, a low B if at best. I'd like you to come up with a couple of success or failure scenarios, within this main success scenario. And just put down what was a trigger condition, what step was trigger condition. So here's the user accepts the default credit for checkout, for customer checkout and ecom. The user accepts the default credit, I'm sorry, the default payment option. And then this would be customer your customer trigger, customer selects alternative, wishes to choose alternative payment option, and so that's occurs at step 4. So this would be step 4 right here, 4, 5, 6, alternative steps in this main success scenario that describe what the user does for that alternative. And then the same thing applies here. So what this is you basically say if it's an alternative success scenario, then you would just do that, and then what the name is, customer selects alternative payment option or something along that line. Fill in a little description here, and then put the steps in for how they deviate, how the workflow deviates from the main success scenario and these steps. And the same thing is true there. A couple of them, you can copy and paste this. If you want to do 3 or 4, just copy and paste this into another section, and there you go. All right. We talked about what a secondary actor is. Are there any secondary actors? I'm just trying to put together a template which is, complete, that all the trigger event, well, you kind of describe the trigger event up here, but maybe give a little explanation for it here. Again, remember this, this will be reviewed, this in the real world, this would be reviewed by many people, and not just the development team. The quality assurance team would look this over. The customer would look this over. It's not just something for the development team. The precondition. So we said before, I gave a for customer checkout and ecom. The precondition was that the shopping cart is not empty. So we don't have to consider the case where the customer, in terms of the main success scenario, we don't have to consider the case where the customer has selected checkout while their shopping cart is empty. We can just specify here that we're assuming that the shopping cart has at least one item in it, and then whatever else preconditions that you can think of for your particular scenario. How often is it executed? That has a lot to do with how has something to do with the design and other aspects of analysis and design. But is it So there's two scenarios, for example, or two use cases. One for customer registration, and then for, again, I'm sticking with ecom, and then checkout. Well, we would expect customer registration to be pretty infrequent compared to checkout, which we would expect to happen a lot, hopefully. So, maybe some metric. I'm saying, estimated number of times per day this use case gets executed by one of our customers. Um, this is handy information when it comes to design. And then success criteria, it's optional, but what do we assume to be the success? When the system, when this use case completes successfully, what are the conditions? Well, we would have a new order created for customer checkout. If we ran through the success scenario, either the main success or an alternative, at the end of the process, we'd expect a new order, to be placed into the system. A new order is created, and whatever else you might think of. And then the development cost is, just an estimate of how difficult we expect. And this is a little early, but how many, is this going to be? Oh, you could put down a number of man hours. This is difficult to come up with an accurate number, but I expect this will take. Um, I don't know, coming up with reasonable numbers off the top of my head is hard too. It'll take, 40 man hours or 80 man hours to complete. So another metric though, a little thing is this is an easy or average or difficult. So customer registration might be considered easy or average. There's not a lot that can go wrong. There's not many steps to it. So the amount of effort to implement the customer registration workflow or use case would be easier to average. But checkout, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of decisions, a lot of interfacing, a lot of screens. So that would certainly be a difficult, to implement, expensive, takes a long time. Again, coming up with exact number, a reasonable number of hours, it's kind of hard to do, especially for a use case. But um, easy to accomplish, difficult to accomplish is a little discussion. Just these are optional, so whatever you want to come up with, you can think of. Just some additional information about how to clarify how the workflow works, information for the development team to consider, information for the reader to consider, for the customer. Can you identify any risk in implementing this use case? Well, I mean, just to come up with something, I was off the top of my head, we'll have to enter for customer checkout, we'll have to debit, at some point, we want to debit the credit card, uh, the bank account, or the PayPal account, or the credit card, and that's, pretty tricky. That might be tricky. So you could put that down as a risk for that situation. Or for streaming once a month, you want a use case for billing the customer's account, once a month on their anniversary date, once a month, their account gets debited, for the that 1 month, I guess the coming month's subscription. Any non-functional requirements kind of gets back to development cost or frequency of execution, but any sort of non-functional requirements in terms of the performance, this has to work so quickly, the turnaround time, between when the user selects the option to trigger the event and they see a response, stuff like that. Okay, so then also I'm asking each of these use cases to have an activity diagram using a STA. And so you can have one activity diagram and try and capture the main success scenario, and then using those if statements, that branching capability that provided with UML activity diagrams, the branches that for the success or failure scenarios. Usually a failure scenario is an end, double concentric circle. Success scenarios just continue flowing. There's a branch off of it, and then the workflow continues to the end when there's a success. So each failure scenario should wind up with an additional end state in your diagram. But anyway, I showed you how you can go into a STA. When you have the editor open, you can select the elements of the diagram. I could do a Control A to get them all if that's what you want to do, and then you can copy to. There's an option to copy to a bitmap, and then you can just go and paste. Just paste that bitmap into your document, and it'll show up in Word. Okay. All right. So that's generally. Oh, let's see. Well, chances are the requirements will cover the use case, right? Yeah, they overlap if that's what you're asking. Yeah, definitely overlap. You'll have if you want a use case for registration, then you'll have a number of requirements about registration. Yeah, yeah, there's definitely they hate to say definitely because they sound like Raymond, but they do overlap. That's the whole point of it. That's why I'm saying there's two. Sometimes in the normal situation, you'd have requirements or use cases. Seldom I think you'd have both, but I'm asking you to do both because I want you to experience both. All right, any other questions? All right, well, that's it for that. No, don't save. I don't think I wanted to save. And that. All right, so let's see here. Close up the rest of these so I don't accidentally save them later. All right. What time is it? Okay, well, yesterday I had election 3354, the other section, and I covered, we went into the next section. So I'm going to do that now. So I keep both sections relatively synchronized. I don't want one section to pull ahead of the other section because it becomes difficult to manage. Okay, so in this last section, this will be the last section on software development process. So you can see we've talked about the scope and the lifecycle models, and we've talked about prescriptive processes, and oops, I didn't mean to double click on that. And then we went off track a little bit. We started talking about workflows, requirements workflow, because I wanted to get the project going, and unified modeling language again for the project. And now we're circling back after, you might say this is a continuation after section 3, section 4. I said, there were two basic lifecycle models, prescriptive and agile. And we talked all about prescriptive, obviously in section 3. So now here in section 6, again, picking up, we'll talk about the agile development processes. Now let me fix this up. Okay, so the material from this section, here we go, is in the supplemental materials folder. The book doesn't have much on it. And so these are 4 papers. And, I would think actually it's more like that. The importance is more like that. We'll talk about the manifesto, extreme programming. We'll talk about Scrum in these slides. The stuff on continuous integration is really central to it's incremental development, iterative incremental development. And but I don't really focus. I don't have any material in this section specifically on continuous integration, although it's an important concept. I may just have to cut it off someplace. Okay, so as you recall, we showed this a lot, and we talked about how an iterative or incremental software development process. It begins with a set of inception activities, such as maybe a little budgeting, coming up with a high-level schedule, high-level budget, putting together some requirements. That was my idea. What things highlight, doing a first pass at requirements, getting 60% of the requirements identified, or maybe getting the high level, your use cases identified, one or the other or both. And then we entered into, a 3-week period of it, each with the project started with this idea of an iteration lasting 3 weeks. And so within each iteration, well, at the beginning of each iteration, if you recall, the team looks at what work remains, to be accomplished, to be finished, and plans, selects a number of features that they think, or they're pretty certain they can finish in the coming 3-week period. And then, having selected what they think they can accomplish in 3 weeks, they refine the requirements, they perform some analysis and design, and then they build the system, build these features. So the features selected are implemented. And in this section, we'll talk about how, in an agile process, what it means to refine requirements, analysis and design and construction at a high level anyway. Then remember, this whole lower half occurs in one day. So this really represents 3 weeks minus 1 day. And then at the last day of the iteration, maybe a Friday, in the morning, there's a meeting held where the customer, the subject matter expert, the users, anyone who's interested can attend, and the dev team demonstrates the features that they selected and implemented for that 3-week period. Just to emphasize again, not trying to be redundant, that the way this incremental approach works is at the end of that 3 weeks, these features, whatever they are, browsing for a product, selecting a product, whatever the feature is 100% completed. The screens are done. The database is working. All of the business rules in between the two are working correctly. And it's not even ideally for it to work. There should be no additional work necessary, no additional development necessary to implement those features. Otherwise, you just have a partial implementation. You'll always be 90% finished. Anyway, at the end, so my point, and at the end, there's this meeting, and the team illustrates the completed features, and the users get to sit down with it, and it's kind of like an integration testing. The end users, who are the ultimate, critique of, how is it right or not, they're shown, and hopefully, it's complete. The subject matter expert knew what they were talking about when they helped refine the requirements with the analysis and so on. And the users or whomever is going to sign off on it says, yeah, these are great, this is done. Hopefully not too often, but occasionally the users will find some fault, some problem with the implementation, and then those problems will be documented, and they will go into the head of the thing, whatever is going to be accomplished. Fixing those problems will be the first thing accomplished at the start of the next iteration. So that's in the beauty of incremental. The problems are discovered right away, and the team addresses those problems. The dev team addresses those problems while all of the design and analysis and all of that work is fresh in their memory. When they're best suited to do that debugging or refactoring or whatever is necessary to make it right. Okay, so that is part of the incremental process. And incremental development, I have a slide here, a little further on. All agile processes are incremental. I mean, again, a agile waterfall process is an oxymoron. That's two ends of the spectrum. They're complete opposites, although they both are meant to deliver software. Okay, so like incremental, this is just essentially a review from the prescriptive section about all the problems that were bad about everything bad about waterfall. We spent a couple slides talking about that in a previous lecture. I don't want to go over it again, but except to point out that the main glaring problem with waterfall was at the beginning of the project, the development team is expected to completely and correctly capture all of the requirements for the system when they're least able to do it, when they have the least understanding of the problem domain and the customer's particular issues and problems, and that's why it doesn't work, and all these other things kind of fall out of that. All right, so here is now this is again from that material that I in the supplemental material. And so, Agile, is it here? A guy named Kent Beck is largely credited with coming up with the concepts of Agile, and a lot of it is, was, so this is like in the late 90s. A lot of this was, this is what's wrong with waterfall. And so the Agile is sort of a rebellion against waterfall. Like we have at this point in time, we have 22, 23 years of, hindsight behind us. But if you imagine back in, 96 or 97, whenever this was first published, it was, a little bit revolutionary. And that's why, being revolutionary, revolutions need a manifesto. And so him and some others who largely are ignored, but Ken Beck led the team that came up with this manifesto. And that's one of those documents. Here's a quote from it. So the Agile process, what is an Agile process? An Agile process seeks to eliminate the counterproductive oversight, excessive documentation, and other process mandated activities that don't directly contribute to delivering a useful quality system to the customer. So, there was a level of frustration with all of the process, all of the activities and artifacts that were needed to build a functional system. And one way of looking at that is all this effort and the process is a waste of time. It's not directly contributing to constructing the system. So the question is, well, what is the minimum process, the minimum artifacts, the minimum effort, in terms of process that is needed to coordinate and execute a software development project to produce a correct and complete system? And that's what Agile is. It's all about just cutting process to the bone to get the bare, to identify the minimal amount of effort that doesn't directly contribute to coding, essentially, to delivering a useful quality system. So that's what Agile is about. Now, so contrasted with the prescriptive process, which emphasizes activities at every phase and artifacts. You have to remember that, that process, with the yellow nodes in it and the list underneath it, of all of the phases and activities and artifacts that are produced for that particular process. That's what they're against. All of that. A natural mindset is against all that. Okay, so a prescriptive process. We had activities and artifacts, and we wanted to generate and maintain those artifacts. If the requirement document is out of date, let's update the requirements document. If we've changed the design, let's update the design documents, and so on. And also, a prescriptive process emphasized, schedules and milestones and monitoring the project's, progress in terms of, have these milestones been met? And of course, that requires effort on the part of the project manager and the dev team to, record those metrics and information, and again, is not directly contributing to delivering a system. So the idea of incremental development, which is kind of new now, was a new concept back when Agile was introduced. So right now, we're incremental. I think is just wonderful, and and I think everyone should have an incremental process. Unified process is incremental, as we talked about. It's a prescriptive increment. Unified process is prescriptive and incremental. But if it's not incremental, like I said, you can't have a waterfall Agile process. So only incremental processes are Agile. We'll talk about the range, but you can have an incremental process like the unified process, which is most prescriptive in terms of maintaining documentation, having schedules, and so on. But still, we're using the idea of iterations and incremental deliveries to to run the to run the project. And then now this section, I should mention, and I didn't mention earlier, just to say that this section is divided into three parts, these slides. We're going to talk about the agile philosophy and what does it mean to be agile in the first 10 or so slides. And then we'll talk about two agile processes, the extreme programming and Scrum. And when we get to that, so I'm just pointing out that right now these first few slides is about, what does it mean to be agile, and the next, and then we'll get to, I don't think we're going to finish it today, but we'll get to extreme programming and the practices. How do you run a program? Sorry, how do you run a process using extreme programming? And then I'll talk about how do you run a process using Scrum last. And again, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it here, but that's what we're going for. So the lack of activities and artifacts makes Agile more of a philosophy than a process. So when I presented this yesterday, I kind of found myself getting way off on a negative anti-Agile rant because I don't think this is the best way to run a project. I think it's a very short-sighted way to run a project, and I'll get to why I think that's true. So, but what I'm saying here in this slide, and this is an opinion, my opinion, the lack of activities. So as I said before, with an agile process, we eliminate activities and artifacts that don't directly contribute, blah, blah. So that is what a process is, activities and artifacts. So rather, it's not a process. Agile is not really a process. It's really more of a philosophy. It's more of and that's what this first section talks about. Now, here's the philosophy or the agile attitude. This is how you run a program. You have values that determine how the team behaves rather than specific artifacts that need to be produced. You have this is the mindset the team should be in order to run a agile process. It's not even a process, an agile project successfully. So if we talk about process, we can say it's either a light touch or a heavy hand. So a heavy hand, that's basically not waterfall, but a prescriptive process. We have activities and artifacts, and we have schedules and phases, and we have sign-off meetings and transitions to other meetings. We have project management and schedules and milestones, and they all have their purpose. And I talked about what those purposes were, but that's a heavy hand. The other side of that, we have a light touch, a process which doesn't really have artifacts to begin with, doesn't really have activities, and if it does any, they're very simple and very lightweight, easy to implement, don't take a lot of time. That's the light touch. So you could look at that as a spectrum. And the agile process, will suggest the lightest of possible touches in terms of project management and oversight and requirements and so on. The lightest possible touch in terms of. So again, without any of that, without any direction, in your process, it's really more of a philosophy. All right. So here is Kent Beck's manifesto. It's got some of the main points out of that kind of a short paper. Where am I on time? Yeah. Well, anyway. So natural processes will limit activities and artifacts and keep the project oversight to the absolute, all of these things, activities, artifacts, oversight to an absolute minimum. So what is a project, value, again, philosophy? The development team over process and tools. So the main feature in my mind, what makes an agile process work is the development team's attitude. The development team really has to want to make the process work, really has to want to deliver a system on time and within budget, because there's always a schedule and there's always a budget. Nobody gets a blank check to write a system. Take your time, do a nice job. If you're done this year, that'd be nice, but if not, don't do a nice job. There's the time. You have to have this done. We have this much money scheduled to produce the system, and given the given the cost of the development team, salaries and so on, you have this much time before the money runs out. So there's your deadline. Um, and so the development team is the most important aspect of a successful agile process. Has no, because there's no process really to speak of. It's all the team. It's all on the team. Working software over documentation. So this gets back to the minimum amount of artifacts and effort in terms of process. It's a process that has a minimum amount of artifacts and effort. In fact, none is the most minimum, but still producing a quality system. A working, complete, and correct system. It's all about, now this is one of the things, that's why it's called Agile. Agile comes down to the idea that, I'm just gonna finish with the slide, so not quite as far as the other team got, but no matter, the other section. So it's all about, because there's no requirements, because there's no documentation, it's the SME before they start coding, no documentation or requirements before you start coding. It's all on the subject matter expert and the customer on hand throughout the project to answer questions. They're at the beginning of the iteration to flesh out the features and come up with some kind of requirements. I mean, although again, when I describe that here, I'm talking about unified process more than I was talking about Agile. It's all on the SME to help and guide the development team through the entire development process, to delivering the system. And they have to be a full-time member. If there's a question, the SME has to be on hand to answer it. Otherwise, the development stalls out. Without an answer to this question, we can't move forward. So, this is much more than a prescriptive process. The SME has got to be on hand all the time to to answer questions and to help with requirements. It's help to understanding. I hate to say requirements. Help with understanding the problem and the solution, the correct solution, and so on. Again, philosophy, responding to change over following a process. So, a lot of times, if it's a waterfall process, the requirements are fixed at the beginning of the program, and the requirements shouldn't change, which is basically responding to change. Customer has a problem. They want to make a change to the system halfway in. With waterfall, that's problematic. Not to say it can't be done, but when it's done, the requirements are now changed. The requirements are out of date if someone doesn't update them, and updating the requirements take time and so on. So responding to change over following the process. Again, it's more of a philosophy. Emphasis on simplicity in both process and design. Well, I've emphasized this emphasis on simplicity of a process, basically eliminate your process and then you have the simplest process possible. And then system design. We'll talk a little bit about this when we get to extreme programming, but the idea is you're not going to need, I'll get to it later, but you're not going to need it. That's just a philosophy. You could look that up. Is that you don't add complexity to the design if you think it will facilitate something that you're going to see in the future. So don't add complexity to the design to meet a requirement or to implement a feature that is downstream. Chances are there are a good chance you may not need it, or when you get to implementing the feature, you'll have another solution. Anyway, we'll talk about this idea of simplicity of design, in the extreme programming section. The importance of testing throughout the project lifecycle. Well, no one can argue with this. And this is why I say this is the best thing about incremental development. It's that at the end of each iteration, we have that demo and the customer comes in and identifies the problems, and then those problems are fixed immediately. And, that's the way to do it. Continuous system integration. Well, that has to do with that Fowler paper that I'm not going to get into. Continuous integration. Here, it's a strong philosophy in Agile, but I just had to, cut it off someplace. Well, I'm out of time, and I have another course that no one will show up for. Oh, I got 19 here, in my software architecture course. So that's all for today, and thank you for attending, guys. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you in face to face. Try to stay warm, and we'll see you next Tuesday. All right, guys. Thanks again for attending. I appreciate it. Yeah, and so they did actually cancel